Biden.
Will the gentleman
And with
yield?
that, I will yield the balance of my time to my ranking member.
Ms. Brown, thank you so much. You know, you started off by saying something pretty profound, which is we are here instead of doing the business of the American people because the Republicans have offered us no positive agenda in their year in office. We know we've wasted countless weeks in them just trying to pick a speaker. And we've wasted countless weeks with their inertia and their do-nothing policies. But Ms. Brown, I don't know if you recall, I just don't want people having to take your word for it. I think numerous Republicans have gotten up on the floor of the House complaining about the fact that they have no agenda. I think our colleague Chip Roy from Texas said that the Republicans have not given him one thing, a single thing, I remember him saying, to campaign on. So I just want to ask you, when you're saying that they have no agenda, that's not a partisan point. You're getting that from Republicans, aren't you?
That is correct.
One of our colleagues said that there was Trump derangement syndrome, and of course, Trump derangement begins with Donald Trump himself. He thinks he has a legal right to assassinate U.S. citizens. He thinks he can grab women by their genitals, although that's not the word that he used. He said that if Joe Biden is reelected president, there will be World War II. He is obviously deranged and disoriented. But the real Trump derangement syndrome that I see is those people who cannot break from Donald Trump after he's proven himself to be completely and totally unworthy of your support. Because I'm looking at talented, gifted people on the other side of the aisle, the ones who have not left Congress in frustration or because they've broken with Donald Trump and clashed with him. But I'm still looking at people who have their wits about them, I think, but you're acting like cult members, like you're sleeping on the basement of a cult, listening to tapes all night, and I beg you to get over your Trump derangement syndrome. Thank you very much for yielding, Ms. Brown.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. First, it was said in this hearing, Mr. Chairman, about you specifically, that you repeatedly said you would give Mr. Biden any opportunity. He could choose which one to come and speak in front of this committee. He could do it by deposition. He could do it by open hearing. It was up to him. The truth of the matter, though, is, members, is that the chairman's words are not binding. Like, no other member's words of Congress are really not binding. The binding article.
Point of order. Does the chairman agree with that? Point of order. Does the chairman agree?
Are you going to restore my time?
Point of order. Just point of order.
Okay.
Does the chairman agree that the chairman's words are not binding on the committee?
That's not a point of order. It has nothing to do with the order of this hearing. Thank you. Can I go back to 4 minutes and 34 seconds? That's where I was before I was interrupted by Mr. Raskin.
Yes, reset the clock.
Thank you. Thank you. What is binding is the actual written document, the written language in the subpoena, because a subpoena from this committee is also signed off on by the clerk of the House. That is the binding document that matters here. That is what governs. That's number one. Number two, that was said in this hearing. It was said that our witnesses said that there was no basis for an impeachment. But remember, members on the Democrat side of the aisle, what was said by Mr. Turley at the time was that there was plenty of evidence for the continuation of an impeachment inquiry. And the purpose of that hearing was the relevance basis for an impeachment inquiry. The House has now voted for an impeachment inquiry. And one of the first things that the House did after the vote of an impeachment inquiry was to subpoena Hunter Biden to appear. Hunter Biden has evaded that subpoena. So flagrantly did he evade it that he decided to show up at the Senate side to give a press conference, and Eric Swalwell, a member of the House, helped him get that time on the Senate side to give a press conference. That's a flagrant violation of a congressional subpoena. Secondarily, he has the gall to show up here when we're actually discussing contempt. And he didn't stay. He was sitting right over there. He's not here now. He said he wants to talk. He could have stayed through the whole proceeding. He chose to leave. That's his business. But he was subpoenaed to come here. Back in December, he chose not to of his own volition. He's in violation of that subpoena, a subpoena that was executed with the signature of the clerk of the House of Representatives. That is the document that is binding. That's what we work off of. Mr. Chairman, I actually want to submit for the record an article from the Hill written by Jonathan Turley, and it is titled Eric Swalwell and the Politics of Contempt.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I'm glad something got admitted to the record. A couple other points. One quick point I want to make, and this is in reference to the minorities' report about this $7.8 million. I want the minority to understand one very important distinction between Presidents Biden and President Trump. President Trump has an international real estate portfolio that he has amassed over decades. I'm quite sure if you go back through all of the hotel receipts before he was president of the United States, that you had foreign dignitaries staying at Trump hotels all across the world.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'm not going to yield, Mr. Raskin. I'm making a point. Because they're actually very nice hotels. They look good. People like staying there. President Trump was not running the Trump Organization when he was president of the United States. To my recollection, Eric Trump, the president's son, was actually running the Trump Organization when President Trump was president of the United States. So if he had a portfolio of hotels and people choose, through Expedia, through Kayak, through Hotels.com, if they choose to go and stay there, how is that the president being in violation of what the emoluments clause? That's what you're citing? Stop. Ladies and gentlemen, America, this is ridiculous. The Biden family has no business. They've never had a business except for politics. And the one thing that the Oversight Committee, in conjunction with the Ways and Means Committee and in conjunction with the Judiciary Committee, has always been able to demonstrate is that they shook down foreign nations for millions, 26 million at the latest count and growing, millions. And there was never any business entity involved except public corruption and a pay-for-play scheme. The House Oversight Committee would like to get to the bottom of this under the impeachment inquiry of the House. We have questions for Hunter Biden. We issued a subpoena for him to answer said questions. He ignored a congressional subpoena as a private citizen. There are many attorneys on the other side of the aisle. If you had one of your clients in your private practice ignore a congressional subpoena as a private citizen, you would advise them not to, because they would be held in contempt and they would actually be punished by the Department of Justice. So I find it interesting to see today.
Yield so I can
I'm not
respond?
going to yield, Mr. Goldman, because I had a question for you earlier. You didn't want to take my question, so I'm not going to take yours. Thank you. So, in closing, I will say, private citizens, yes, they have a responsibility to answer congressional subpoenas. They do. Hunter Biden had it, and he was flagrant. He decided to give a press conference. So we're going to do this business, and he should be held in contempt by the full House of Representatives. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C. for 5 minutes.
I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Raskin.
I'd like to thank the distinguished delegate from the District of Columbia, and I need to correct the record because of several false statements made about the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, although I do appreciate the gentleman from Florida's attempt to at least engage on the matter of substance that was raised so powerfully by Ms. Crockett. Now, let's start with this. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 says that neither the President nor any member of Congress can receive a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title from a prince, a king, a foreign government, quote, Mr. Donald, of any kind whatever, without going to Congress first and obtaining the consent of Congress. There's no hotel exception, Mr. Donald, to the Foreign Emoluments Clause. There's no international real estate syndicate exception to the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Mr. Donald. And also, I will take you up on your challenge to see whether the Trump Hotel in Washington, the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, the Trump Hotel on Fifth Avenue, the Trump Hotel at UN Plaza, the 4 of the more than 500 businesses that we got documentation for, whether they actually had the same level of business coming from Saudi Arabia, the communist bureaucrats of China, who were the leading spender, as you know, if you've read our report, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, India, Egypt, and so on. We will make that comparison about what was done before. If you get the chairman to call off the ban on further documents coming from Mazars. So
have you ever stayed at a Trump hotel, Mr. Raskin?
No, and I never would stay at a Trump hotel. I've got too much self-respect and concern for hygiene. So, but in any event, Mr. Donald, you're totally wrong about what the Foreign Emoluments Clause stands for. Abraham Lincoln was given 2 elephant tusks by the king of Siam during the Civil War, and he liked them very much. He wanted to keep them, but he went to Congress which is what every other president did before and every president did since, right up until Donald Trump. And he asked whether he could keep the tusks. And Congress, though they loved Honest Abe, said, no, you can't keep them. I mean, John F. Kennedy was offered citizenship by the people of Ireland because they loved him so much, and he refused to take it, saying that even though it didn't violate the letter of the Emoluments Clause, it violated the spirit of the Emoluments Clause. And Donald Trump converted the presidency into an instrument for self-enrichment. He raked in millions of dollars from the most corrupt governments on earth, who came in with specific favors that we document in our report that they got from Donald Trump. I beseech my colleagues, I will read any book, any magazine, any speech you've given that you want me to read. Read this report and come back and tell me if you think Donald Trump did the right thing in converting the White House into a for-profit operation. No other president in American history has come anywhere close. And you ask why he's so determined to stay in office that he would unleash violence against his own vice president, the brother of your colleague, of our colleague. Why would he do that? It's because it was a money-making operation, and it was a great business grift for a guy who went bankrupt several times. And yet, out of some misguided partisan loyalty, you're going to stick with him. I don't even know why you stick with him. He was a Democrat longer than he was a Republican. He wanted to run for president on the Reform Party. You guys have been taken over by an absolute con man. And now you're acting like members of a religious cult who don't even remember how you got in the first place. We say return the profits, Donald Trump, $7.8 million. I've got a letter, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to share with you telling Donald Trump to return these $7.8 million. It's a small fraction of what he raked in. We want to know about the other 2 years in office. We want to know about the other businesses, not just those 4 that we were able to get information on. And we want to know about every country on earth, not just the 20 autocracies and dictatorships that we found. This is our government. This is our Constitution. And we're going to stand up for it against Donald Trump and anybody who follows him to the path of oblivion. Abraham Lincoln started your party as a third party to replace the Whigs because they wouldn't take a moral stand against slavery. It was a pro-freedom, anti-slavery, pro-union, pro-honesty party. And your party has been reduced to a corrupt, authoritarian cult of personality. And everybody does whatever Donald Trump tells them to do, which is what we're doing here today with this stupid attempt to hold Hunter Biden in contempt when he has come forward to say he will testify and give you everything you want, as the chairman of the committee repeatedly offered in public. So forgive my outrage and indignation, but enough is enough. Let's get back to the business of the people, as Ms.
Chair
Brown
recognizes
said.
Mr. Higgins for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Will come to order without objection. The committee may recess at any point. I'd like to go ahead and welcome everyone back to the full committee, and I recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas. Thanks for joining the committee. We look forward to hearing from you as we discuss the department's budget and the crisis this administration has created at our southwest border. This year, we recognize the department's 20th anniversary and thank the many public servants, past and present, who have worked tirelessly to keep our homeland safe. In the aftermath of 9/11, the department was created to safeguard the American people. This mission includes securing the U.S. borders and approaches. Mr. Secretary, you took an oath where you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. Your job is to protect the homeland. And one of those obvious duties is to secure the United States sovereign borders and to implement the laws duly passed by Congress. However, you have not secured our borders, Mr. Secretary, and I believe you've done so intentionally. There is no other explanation for the systematic dismantling and transformation of our border into a lawless and dangerous open border. You've asserted in the past that it's an issue of resources, but the numbers show a very different story. In just the 2 years of your tenure, more people have crossed our southern border into the United States than the previous 12 years of 2 administrations combined. Did the budget suddenly decrease and result in this massive surge? No. Did the number of Border Patrol agents suddenly get cut in January of 2021? No. What got cut were 89 effective policies. As Chief Ortiz told us in our hearing in McAllen, Texas, we don't have a resource crisis, we have a policy crisis. We will fulfill our obligation to the American people and our oath to the Constitution. Secretary Mayorkas, need I remind you that Congress makes the laws and the executive branch is obligated to follow those laws? Apparently, the answer to that question is yes, because since you've become secretary, you've disregarded the laws written by this branch of government, laws passed by both Republicans and Democrats. Behind me, you can see a list of the ways you've made our border and our country less secure. You intentionally ended all construction of and contracts to build the border wall system. You attempted to terminate the migrant protection protocols, remain in Mexico policy, and when these efforts failed you, refused to fully enforce the policy. You illegally and without congressional approval created mass parole programs for countries like Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and expanded the use of the CBP One app to facilitate these programs. This is ultimately playing a shell game, Mr. Secretary, wherein those who would otherwise come illegally with no justification for entry now get to enter under the pretense of legality. You lowered the credible fear standards, so even illegal border crossers who've broken the laws of the United States can claim asylum despite knowing that 9 out of 10 claims will be found illegitimate. You instructed ICE agents not to detain or deport the vast majority of individuals illegally in the country, while also stating that the crime of being in the country illegally is by itself no longer grounds for removal. You just made that up. You refused to detain illegal aliens pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act and instead allowed them to be processed en masse into the United States. You moved northern border agents to the southwestern border, leaving our northern border vulnerable, which has led to an increase in encounters in some sectors as much as 900%. And finally, you ended Title 42 in May without any plan to deal with the surge. What's this gotten us? Well, here behind me, you can see the results. Unfortunately, the facts are overwhelming. More than 5 million encounters at the southwest border since President Biden took office. 1.4 million gotaways, known gotaways, who evaded U.S. Border Patrol agents since President Biden took office. And these are only the ones we know about. We learned from U.S. Border Patrol Chief Ortiz that these numbers are likely 20% higher. 80 individuals on the terrorist watch list have crossed the southwest border so far in FY23. 14,148 pounds of fentanyl seized in 23, enough to kill the entire U.S. population, the U.S. population you swore to defend and protect, over 9.5 times. And this is only the amount we know about. We have no idea how much of this poison is actually being brought into the country by drug smugglers taking advantage of our porous border and your lax policies. Last month, this committee held a hearing in McAllen, where Chief Ortiz stated under oath that DHS does not have the operational control of our borders, contradicting testimony that you previously gave before this committee. Chief Ortiz went on to say that 5 of our 9 sectors of our southwest border are under the control of the drug cartels. Unimaginable. Secretary Mayorkas, your reckless border policies are enriching the drug cartels, and these cartels are laughing in our face. They find it amusing that the most powerful nation on earth is not only unwilling to stop them, but is actively facilitating their business model. Unfortunately, your admission during the March 28, 23 Senate Judiciary hearing that you're unaware that cartels are using illegal aliens as decoys to detract Border Patrol agents while they smuggle illicit contraband and illegal aliens across the border only emboldens these cartels. Honestly, your admission reflects incompetence. Imagine a general officer in the Army who has no clue about the strategy of his enemy. We'd fire that general on the spot. Mr. Secretary, every time you fail to acknowledge that this is a crisis, you lose even more credibility with the men and women of DHS, to say nothing of the American people. As you ignore the crisis at our border, thousands of Border Patrol agents and CBP officers are on the front lines, putting their lives at risk to keep our country safe. And what kind of treatment do they receive from you? They're accused of whipping migrants crossing the border. And now we find out that your department knew the whole time that this report was bogus. You went on national television and vilified these agents of the Horse Patrol Unit. These men and women are proud to fulfill their duty to secure our border, and they do this with no thanks, no support, and quite honestly, dishonesty from this administration. It's downright shameful. I don't blame our Border Patrol agents for feeling the way they do about you. As a former Army officer and doctor and CEO, I know that when a leader loses the trust of those he's entrusted to command and serve, it's over. Now, let's turn our attention to your budget proposal for DHS. Mr. Secretary, this budget proposal is an insult to every American. It fails to take seriously many of the most pressing national security threats, especially our wide-open border. President Biden himself likes to quote, and I quote him, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value," end quote. Well, this budget clearly shows us what this administration values, and it's not the safety of the American people. Like your past budgets, like your policy decisions, and your actions, this proposed DHS budget has the singular purpose of continuing to encourage people to come into this country illegally. Here behind me, you can see this very clearly. Pet projects at the DHS, we're going to add $4 billion, but for CBP, we're going to cut their budget by $1.2 billion. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the folks that move people into the United States, we're going to give them another $1 billion. That's what you want to do. ICE, you're going to decrease by $421 million. This is all about moving people into the country and not about border security. The objective of this budget is not to secure our border, but to force CBP personnel to process illegal aliens into the interior of the United States. The proposed $4.7 billion Southwest Border Contingency Fund is just another gimmick to spend American taxpayer dollars on a crisis you created, with the goal of processing illegal aliens quicker out of DHS custody so that you can settle them into the interior of our country. The administration's saying the quiet part out loud. By requesting funding for border management instead of border security, you're signaling you have no intention of securing our borders. Instead of spending any money on wall construction that would actually have both a practical and deterrent impact, the administration has proposed spending $3.9 billion of DHS money on a climate resilience program. Meanwhile, you propose spending a mere $40 million to combat fentanyl that's devastating our country. Do you think the parents and families who will continue to lose their children, their brothers, their sisters to fentanyl will take comfort in knowing that DHS has at least added more to the massive money already spent by this administration on climate change? I don't think so. Mr. Secretary, I could go on, but I will yield. I do hope you've come here today ready to be honest with the American people, because if you're bold enough to make these policy
phố đêm đèn mơ răng răng màu trắng như vì sao gối đầu ngủ yên. Phố đêm nhiều lần suy tư ghi nhớ còn trong đời những ngày thương tích lớn. Mây đen làm úa trắng gầy, cho nên còn tiếng say mềm trước thềm ngàn lời vu vơ. Vì người hay mơ dòng đời như thơ. Nhớ ngày nào nắng ngủ trên cây, tương lá vàng úa tàn. Mây bơ vơ bay khắp nẻo vô tình cho người yêu chiến xa nhà mà vẫn luôn yêu đời, bằng câu ca tiếng cười tìm vui trong giấc mơ, dù bâng khuâng chữ ngờ. Phố đêm lạc loài hương yêu, chìm đắm như hàng cây giá lạnh ướt mềm. Phố đêm chờ người phong sương, chinh chiến từ lâu rồi, có niềm riêng hay ước cho tôi 10 ngón thiên thần, cho tôi 10 ngón thiên thần, để rồi dìu người tôi yêu, dìu người không yêu và người chưa yêu. Vàng úa tàn, mây bơ vơ bay khắp nẻo vô tình, cho người yêu ước mơ. Người đi khai phá nét kiêu sa, tuy lính chiến xa nhà mà vẫn luôn yêu đời, bằng câu ca tiếng cười tìm vui trong giấc mơ, dù bâng khuâng chữ ngờ. Phố đêm lạc loài hương yêu, chìm đắm như hàng cây giá lạnh ướt mềm. Phố đêm chờ người phong sương, chinh chiến từ lâu rồi, có niềm riêng hay ước cho tôi 10 ngón thiên thần, cho tôi 10 ngón thiên thần, để rồi dìu người tôi yêu, dìu người không yêu và người chưa yêu, để rồi dìu người tôi yêu, dìu người không yêu và người chưa